The CRTC wants to know how radio, TV, and digital platforms in Canada can best meet the needs of Indigenous viewers, listeners, and content creators. Join the conversation today at crtc.gc.ca/indigenous-broadcasting.
A message from the Government of Canada.
Le CRTC veut savoir comment la radio, la télévision et les plateformes numériques au Canada peuvent mieux répondre aux besoins des spectateurs, auditeurs et créateurs de contenu autochtones. Joignez-vous à la conversation aujourd'hui au crtc.gc.ca/radiodiffusion-union autochtone.
Un message du gouvernement du Canada.
I'm Rick Harp. This is your APTN News Brief for Tuesday, May 28th. We begin in Regina, where 9 years after the drowning of her 14-year-old son, a mother's fight for an inquest into his death has finally been realized this week. And according to a 2015 provincial coroner's report, Haven Dubois had left school to smoke cannabis with his friends. He then left their vehicle on foot and was last seen by a creek east of the school. It was there he'd later be found unresponsive by his mother in waist-deep water. That same coroner ruled drowning as the cause of death, with cannabis playing a factor, a decision disputed from the beginning by Dubois' mom, Richelle Bear, who believes foul play was involved and that Regina police never performed a proper investigation. Years of protests and cross-country awareness walks later, those concerns have finally won a hearing. To Kamloops, BC, site of a grim anniversary yesterday, and Monday marked 3 years since 215 anomalies were found on the grounds of a former residential school. Tina House now on what's happened since that horrific discovery.
On May 27, 2021, Kamloops Tisawepum announced they had discovered 215 anomalies, suspected to be unmarked graves. That news shocked the world, and this impromptu memorial was started outside of the former Kamloops Indian Residential School. Visitors from around the world descended upon Kamloops to come pay their respects, many of them also residential school survivors, who had their own horrific tales of how they barely survived.
I knew this long time. I know that way back. I know where it is.
In June of 2021, we met up with the late Stanley Paul Sr. In 1957, he was forced to attend the residential school in Kamloops. For Stanley, he, along with thousands of others who were forced to attend these houses of horror, the physical, mental, and sexual abuse they endured has left deep imprints of trauma that has never really healed, despite the years that have gone by.
Couple of girls over here I know, and I knew them. My nieces, my cousins are died over here.
We went from the discovery of 215 unmarked graves at the former Kamloops Indian Residential School site to thousands of unmarked graves right across the country.
Grand Chief Stuart Phillips says what happened in Kamloops inspired other nations from across Canada to start their own searches.
And that continues. At this point in time, more and more First Nations are organizing themselves to investigate the sites where there are residential schools in their territories.
And for Kamloops Tisawepum, it's been 3 years since the discovery, and they released this statement. While the number 215 has become a symbol of the children lost at the Kamloops Indian Residential School, it's important to recognize that it represents far more than a numerical figure. It stands for the countless spirits of children who never had the chance to return home from residential schools from all across Canada. Grand Chief says there is much more work to be done.
I'm proud of the resilience of our people, that in spite of this horrific genocidal reality, First Nations people across this country are continuing to progress.
To Kamloops Tisawepum have yet to release further details about when excavation will take place to identify the anomalies discovered. Tina House, APTN National News, Vancouver.
More news in a moment.
Hi, I'm Dennis Ward, host of Face to Face. Coming up on our next episode, we'll be taking a look back at some of our favorite moments as we wrap up Season 10 of the show. Our guests will include MMIWG advocates, actors and filmmakers, and even a sitting premier. Tune in Tuesday on APTN or listen to the Face to Face podcast. Download and subscribe on your favorite player.
Delegates from the Winnebago-area Health Authority are in Ottawa this week. They're there to find out why the federal government won't live up to an agreement signed in 2007 to fund a new hospital in Moosonee, Ontario. Annette Francis reports.
They made a commitment. They need to fulfill it.
Members of the Winnebago-area Health Authority, or WAHA, were supported by First Nations leaders as they spoke with media at the Assembly of First Nations head office. Lynn Innes is the president and CEO of WAHA. She said the 75-year-old Winnebago General Hospital has long surpassed its intended lifespan.
We've been a good partner. The provincial ministry has been a good partner. So the feds need to show up and fulfill their commitment.
In 2007, the federal government signed a framework agreement to fund 45% to build a new health campus, including a new hospital on Moose Factory Island. The projected amount required from Ottawa is over $1 billion. Dr. Elaine Ennis said the hospital serves 5 coastal communities on James Bay, but it struggles with providing specialty services.
We can no longer provide obstetrical care because we don't have the health human resources, which means that the furthest community, which is Peawanuck, they have to leave their community and fly all the way to Kingston so that they can have a baby. This service should be available in our own hospital, in our own community.
Chief Peter Wesley of Moose Cree First Nation says Canada has an obligation to the First Nations of Treaty 9.
You have my formal invitation as Chief of Moose Cree to come to Moose Factory and see this hospital and the deplorable condition that it's in. It simply cannot stay as this going forward. This would not be tolerated in any other urban community. This would not be tolerated in Ottawa.
APTN contacted Indigenous Services Canada for comment, but did not receive a response by airtime. Annette Francis, APTN National News, Ottawa.
Still in that province, a First Nations politician is set to make history there today.
It's an honor to be able to speak my language, and Shiniwan, also known as Ojibwe, to speak in the Ontario legislature.
In a few hours, NDP MPP Sol Mamakwa will rise in the provincial chamber to ask a question in the Ojibwe language, watching from the gallery his family, friends, and elders. It's the first time the Ontario legislature will allow a language other than English or French to be used. The only First Nations legislator at Queen's Park, Mamakwa was once punished for speaking his language at an Ontario residential school. And ahead of this historic occasion, he shares what it means and the question he'll ask in the chamber.
Elder care. It's regarding long-term care for the people of Kiwetinoong, and this is for them, not just First Nations people, but also the people that live in Sulikout, the seniors, the elders that live in Sulikout, where we do not have to move far. So I'm hoping, I get a commitment to finally build a new long-term care facility that is so needed. I'm really excited about it, but also I'm really deeply moved by it. It's my mom's birthday. She'll be 79, and that's certainly an extra added gift to her for her 79th birthday.
And finally, the Northwest Territorial Budget was recently presented in the legislature. With more on its specifics, Charlotte Moore-Jacobs.
The closure of a jail, job cuts, savings in office leases, and even using the printer less. These are some of the cost-cutting measures the Northwest Territories government says they'll implement. On May 24th, Finance Minister Carolyn Wozniak tabled the 2024-2025 operating budget. The operating surplus sits at $294 million, with $2.6 billion in revenue and $2.22 billion in spending. This year will see $48.4 million in cuts across departments. As with the last few budgets, the NWT is creeping closer to the debt ceiling. Total debt is expected to reach $1.6 billion. That's just shy of $1.8 billion cap they can receive from the feds. So where will all the savings come from? One way of saving $2.7 million is with the closure of the men's jail in Fort Smith, which had more staff than inmates. The building may be repurposed into a wellness center. The budget proposes cutting 91 public sector positions, reassigning positions that are currently filled. Other cost-saving measures proposed: $1.6 million in saving from infrastructure leases, $900,000 from discontinuing a midwifery expansion program, and $300,000 in printing costs. With the closure of Diavik Diamond Mine in 2026 and the NWT's reliance on public service jobs, the minister says diversification is key. Wozniak says more money into housing will help attract and maintain workers. The budget cites diversification with new money for resource extraction projects, commercial fishing, tourism, and film. MLAs will discuss the proposed budget and vote before the end of spring session on June 13th. Charlotte Mark-Jacobs, APTN National News, Yellowknife.
And that's your APTN News Brief for Tuesday, May 28th. I'm Rick Harp.